Hi, Mark.
Hi, Jack.
We're here
Thanks for making time today.
for another chat. Yeah, thank you very much. So, talk to me.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about some shame today and um, also a relapse um, and um, I guess my dysfunctional vocal cords. So those were the
In
three,
terms of how you use them,
or don't use them.
yeah,
Is that's the problem. And and then how do I use them in a loving way and not um, a rage or vindictive or um, you know in a productive, loving way? How to use them? And I've experienced it. So I have experience with it, but it's still just something I need to revisit.
okay.
So um, and that's just what's been on my mind. I went and visited family. I had a relapse when I was there. Um,
Describe that in short terms.
um, as far as what or where, or it was just
Hmm.
as I don't need to discuss what it was. Doesn't matter what the substance or behavior was, but I had a relapse.
Right.
Um, and I am looking back at it, and where I was caught off guard. Was I caught off guard? Um, was I
What's your take?
was I holding a reservation? These are the things I'm starting to sort of look at right now.
Or
Um,
resentment. I mean, resentment would be a good
yeah,
term.
yeah. Um, and to be honest, I think I had a little bit of it just doesn't fucking matter. Um, After seeing, people in my life do everything right, and it just not matter as far as when it's your time, it's your time. So I didn't. I mean, I don't need to help move it along, which I can tell I do when I go out. But I'm just trying to be transparent and honest. Of I think I had a little bit of it just doesn't matter, after seeing um, my brother pass. Um, so I'm just trying, I'm just trying to return to some honesty and some esteemable acts so I can feel esteemable and all that. And how that all fits into what is reality and what is my thoughts about it. I mean, I'd love some input.
Well, I think you're hitting all the markers. Uh, you talk about wanting to speak honestly or speak lovingly, and I would share that that is speaking honestly. And what I've learned is that I have no obligation to be right to speak honestly about what I'm thinking. But when I have the idea that my thinking is who I am, because I've decided that thinking how and what I think is reality, all of a sudden, given that that's wrong, the basis of that thought is wrong, I fight always to be right as a result of trying to compensate for that underlying wrong. Because how and what I think about reality is how and what I think about it. It doesn't create reality if reality is infinite. It doesn't make more or less of it. The matter I make of it is generally the resistance I have to it. rather than see that if it is as it is, that's just it. And we are products of that. And our thinking is a product of that. Our thinking in its natural state is very much aligned with reality, which is why we will no longer be baffled. We will intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us, the big book says, when it comes to sobriety.
Mm-hmm.
So intuition is knowledge beyond reason, means there's no understanding, no thinking to it whatsoever. It's just absolute. It is the absolute state of existence that isn't in time or space. Time and space are in it, effectively. Time and space are possibilities as our experience as humans are within the context of that absolute state of being. So that can seem a little dreamy and a little wooey and a little, too much education and all that. But if that is in fact the basis of existence, we know it already. We've always known it. We know it so well, like we know when we open our eyes, we'll see when in fact we've never actually seen our own eyes. Right? We talked about this the other day. We take steps with great confidence. Gravity will be there, and we don't seem to understand it. The best physicists in the world don't understand it yet. And yet, it does precisely what it's designed to do every time we take a step, every time we stand up, every time we jump, drop, whatever, fall, every single time. So there are absolute, reliable sources that we don't have to think about at all and rely on them constantly. Oxygen was the other one I pointed out to you the other day. We don't worry whether there's going to be oxygen left in the morning. We just breathe and it's there. And very few people suffocate relative to the number of people right now that are breathing. Normally, they're getting oxygen. It may be dirty oxygen. It may have all sorts of contaminants in it. It may be lesser oxygen if they're at higher altitudes, and no oxygen if they're at the bottom of the ocean. But they have tanks with oxygen, so they're, so all those variabilities don't make a change to the fact that it's always available. It's always there when we want it. So if you think of those sources as loving, because they're so generous, they're so ever present and ever giving, it's kind of a baseline of a principled approach to thinking. And if thinking is a byproduct of reality, meaning it's a possibility of reality, then its nature is aligned with reality. And my experience is my thinking about my thinking begins to convolute that when I take for granted, because I can make a conclusion or decision about something, that conclusion and decision is right. And that tends to stem from the idea, first of all, that thinking is critical to our ability to function as humans. And I mean function to survive, and not only survive, but thrive, so we can do more than we need, but what we need becomes so little that everything we can make and beyond that can be shared, can be given without any threat to the immediacy of any responsibilities we have. We don't tend to operate that way for the most part, because the neediness from trying to make the thinking right that isn't right becomes so critical on the internal landscape. It's very hard to think of anything outside of us that isn't a threat, because the major threat is what we're doing in our own experience, creating in our own experience. And when I think those thoughts are me, now I think I am deformed, and I am naturally wrong, and I am fucked, and I am all those things that would go along with the story I tell about how hard the world is and how hard life is and how hard death is to face, when in fact death is, birth is the leading cause of death. If it weren't for the birth, there would be no death. And yet we celebrate one and bemoan the other as though it shouldn't happen. And I'm not suggesting that it's easy to celebrate someone's death, but people do now have celebrations of life at funerals more than they used to, where it was more about mourning and wake and having a wake and grieving, and the Shiva, where you're just basically sitting still with the family quietly for a period of time. And I think there's, the Irish do that with their wakes. I think there's a lot of value to doing that, because the shock of somebody you've known forever all of a sudden disappearing, and you're not going to see them in that way. I mean, here's absolute certainty, and we doubt whether or not we want to accept it. Think of that. We look for certainty and assurance and stability, and here we have it, but don't want to face it.
It's funny you say that. It's, I I had only ever seen death with Shiva. So it was part of the process.
Yeah.
When my dad and my brother passed, it was COVID and there was no Shivas. And
Interesting.
it really like left something empty or a like the
Missing.
what was that?
Missing.
Yeah. And again, it was just, again, my thought. Nothing really was missing. It was just my thought of how I thought I should be processing this.
Well, your brother and father were missing, and the ritual or the grieving process was missing, and the normal. My sense is it's an interesting fact that when someone leaves, it tends to bring the people closest to them closer together.
Mm-hmm.
So that communal experience tends to be very buoying because any lack we feel we can do for them or didn't do for them all of a sudden becomes a possibility of doing for the ones around us. And most of those rituals, sitting Shiva and all that, because they're immediate family, is kind of reinforcing that, just being together, quiet, and just sitting with it, and knowing that you're not alone in that, and that other people are also facing the grief and the trauma of it, the shock of it. There's a certain shock that goes with it because it's, my mother died when I was 15. It took me 11 years to admit how much I missed her.
Yeah.
The idea that she could even be gone was preposterous in certain respects, and yet I managed it in certain very narrow-minded ways to make believe I was keeping control of it, when in fact my body knew better. I had an awareness of tension in my body. I had constipation in my body. I had all sorts of byproducts that were telling me, if I was listening, that I'm not dealing with this very well. I'm not dealing with it at all effectively. I'm dealing with it by virtue of tightening up, but I'm not noticing the tightening up is me resisting the awareness that I really did miss her and I really did love her. And I didn't always know how to say that while she was alive. I didn't know how to express that like you're talking about.
Right. And
So my sense is we're ashamed of that because we're guilty for that. And guilt and shame tend to come together. Guilt isn't an emotion. It's a feeling of a conviction. You've been convicted of what you've done, just like the jury's in. And it seems like a death sentence rather than actually a sentence of life.
I, I remember using guilt and shame interchangeable when I first came into recovery. I thought it was the same thing.
Yeah, I would agree. It probably is. We're ashamed for the guilt. We're ashamed that we are the perpetrators of the mythology that gives us impressions that are not true about things that are so obvious. And it isn't to think that that obvious nature, say, of life existing beyond the body, beyond the time period we spend, is something we can't have mourning and grief for. But if we thought about it accurately while we were alive, the shortcomings that we tend to be regretful for would not be as short because they wouldn't be coming and going the way they do in the sort of pettiness that we tend to have toward each other for things that we see as slights or things that we see as their own inadequacies that we just never going to get over, and they're never going to be able to, and they, rather than, wow, I have a lot of ideas about them that don't seem to have much pertinence once they're gone. And maybe that's actually the case while they're here too. Maybe those thoughts I have are no more important and no more critical and have no more matter in them whatsoever than I give them to make matter the justification I need to make believe it's them doing it rather than me. Nothing is happening prior to my decisions about what's happening. And the same goes for you.
Yeah, it's so reversed. Again, like every
Yes,
time that I should be thinking that I'm thinking they, I should be thinking me. And whenever I'm
you
talking,
are.
and then
You are. You're just calling it them.
yeah, I guess that's true. But what happens when I'm in me? To get out of it, I got to get into they.
Well, in one respect, if you begin to notice or bother to pay attention, if we're one of the points in the big book was talks about bankruptcy. We got to a point where we were bankrupt. Why? Because the idea we had about being able to drink, control our drinking and enjoying our drinking, and this, by the way, for everyone listening, applies to all compulsive behaviors, all impulsive behaviors, and all hyperreactive behaviors. If I'm failing in the thinking I'm doing, I'm bankrupt because it has no value. That's what bankruptcy is. So bankrupt mentally means the thinking I'm doing has no basis in reality. And if reality already is reality, and I keep thinking it's not reality because I'm basing my desperate thinking on some other seeming reality, some other conclusion that seems to be engulfing completely, I get consumed and intoxicated with the idea because I need to manage it all the time because it doesn't have any basis other than my attention. If I'm noticing that and start to give credit for what I'm doing, we talked about this yesterday, just the embracing of it, and not embracing it as though it's always going to feel welcome, but embracing whatever it is as it is, rather than thinking of it as something that shouldn't be happening or wouldn't be happening if this, that, or the other thing hadn't happened. Where we kind of go out into that la la land of all these ideas we have about other places and other times that aren't happening now. Just noticing that the sense we're having is the sense we're having. And the conclusions our thinking is giving us, if we think about them accurately, you start to see that it's really valuable information. When I feel like a loser, I know I'm betting on a losing thought. Why am I feeling like a loser? Because I'm feeling my thought that's lost, that has no value. And it's a good sense. If I start paying attention, then my senses start being incredibly valuable. And I see that they're always honest. They don't have an opinion. They're giving me perfect information, and then I am choosing to disrupt it somehow by countering it with some idea of how it should be rather than what it is as it is, how it is now. And just say, that's it. All that's ever going on is in the present. It's always that way. Everything that's happening is always happening wherever I am in regard to my human existence. And also that same thing is happening for everyone else. And everything they're doing is a part of what I'm witnessing. So there is no disruption between you and them because it's a simultaneous awareness of everything that's actually happening. Now, it may seem impossible to know all the details of everything going on everywhere else, but if everything is interacting, it's kind of like a transmission. There's hundreds of parts in the transmission. I don't understand what they're doing, but they seem to know. Those little parts that we put together and figure out seem to do that for years, hundreds of thousands of miles, if taken care of. It's the same mechanics with our own symmetrical, simultaneous, synchronous, seamless existence. There's no variation. The variations all add up to the totality of everything happening. There's no variation that's excluded. There's no trait that's excluded. They're all included in the ultimate awareness that we have. It may not be as clear about things that are further away, but regardless of that, if I keep thinking it's not happening now, the clarity of those things further away is going to remain to be seen as far away and not here, because I'm developing an insensitivity, trying to overcome my sensitivity to it, and actually starting to defend against it and go numb to the possibility I have to actually be aware of things of much greater, people call it deja vu, extras, think of it, extra sensory perception. What is that? If my sensory perception is being diminished by my refusal to acknowledge what's happening, we're not actually getting extra sensory perception. We're just starting to pay attention to our sensory perception, which is enormously capable of being involved with everything because it was invented amongst everything. Our bodies came into this world in the midst of everything else going on simultaneously at that minute. Now, that may seem a little preposterous. And you don't have to think about it to start to concede that if it's true, if that's accurate, then we're already witnessing everyone, and everything we're doing is having, and we are also central to having an impact on what everybody else is experiencing. The question is, do I want to be a reactive agent in that? A chain reaction, trying to reinforce and insist on a way of thinking that's completely illogical and preposterous because it's a lie? Or start to conclude that the experience the experiences I'm having are actually accurate. And when I look at the words I use and assign them to the thinking I'm doing, I will start to see the profound impact my thinking has on my experience, my human experience. If that knowing basis is absolute, I don't have to think about it at all to have an absolute basis to see clearly that the thinking I'm doing is speaking naturally and honestly to my experience, and it's how I translate it then or misrepresent it that I'm in a conflict with.
But
So
I
when you
can't
talk, what's that?
I can't process it. My brain isn't designed to process the corrupt information I'm giving it.
Exactly. And when it comes to, again, going back to Alcoholics Anonymous, and this was sort of the taproot of this thinking that came out of there, because mental obsession and emotional sobriety and spiritual malady are all terms that came out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and subsequently also the 12 and 12. But the point is, if my body can't process alcohol, and I think it's worthy of noting that every one of the things the body can't process have had human hands on them for the most part, and been turned into some form of concentrate. Alcohol is distilled from corn, potatoes, rice, grains, grapes. It's a distillation, meaning reducing it down to its most potent chemical form. Cocaine, same thing. Heroin, same thing. Heroin, morphine, all of the other opiates are all reductions of a poppy plant. That if you ate the poppy plant, you wouldn't get that high. If you smoke it, like opium comes out of it, it's a very mild high. While it may be addictive, it's very mild compared to heroin. And the tendency of overdosing smoking that is not as great because it isn't as great a concentration. Even with marijuana, well, it's not a reduction. What they've done is concentrated the THC in it and inbred and inbred and inbred and inbred, so that the most potent aspects of it have now become so profoundly greater than they ever were in nature, because we've been developing that stuff. And those things, the body doesn't know how to deal with that kind of concentration. So even in food, junk food, there's no nutrition for the most part. The body doesn't know what to do, so it stores it as fat. There's a lot of fat in it, but it's generally not good fat. So the body, again, doesn't know what to do. It just stores it. What happens when we resist things? We store charge in our body. Like electricity flowing, the resistance to it eventually will melt the cables that it's running through, because it starts to heat up, causes tension. The inflammation ends up causing constriction, and the constriction causes inflammation, like squeezing a balloon. So our organs, everything in the body starts to get stressed. Now, that's an accurate assessment of inflammatory ideas, making something that has no basis, turning it into all that we think that things are. So if you notice clearly and assign the words you're using to the thoughts you're having, you will be giving where credit's due credit. So what's something you can't get in bankruptcy?
Value.
Credit. You can't get credit because you're bankrupt. So you immediately have your credit worthiness, because you're starting to give credit for things that are happening, whether you like it or not, whether you're happy about it or not, whether you think it should be happening or not. If it's happening and you simply look at what's happening as it's happening, listen to the words that are coming, because the words will tell you something's wrong. I feel bad. I feel alone. I feel disgusted. Those are all based on how we're thinking about what's happening. We're disgusted with what we're doing. We have an awareness that goes beyond the thinking we do about the thinking we do. And it helps clarify. If we didn't have that awareness, feeling bad would feel normal and natural and be the only thing we could ever be, and we would celebrate that. So if we're allowing, if love is the nature of nature, it is not loving to misrepresent and be dishonest and manipulate and create ID fraud over the idea that who I am is what I think. None of those are loving things, because they begin to corrupt the expression, as you talked about. How do I use my words and how do I use my action to be more loving? Certainly it doesn't come from internal conflict and emotional turmoil and mental anguish that is self-induced and self-imposed. Doesn't come from that. What's going to come from that are desperate decisions. What are desperate decisions? Half-baked. They're not good food for thought. They're not digestible. They're not going to give any kind of nutritive value to the brain because they're not really aligned with what the brain is designed to do, which is express reality and truth. That's its natural thing, just like light shines and the seeds know to grow. Nobody has to tell them or beat them into it or send them to school or therapy or anything else. They just know exactly what to do. That sort of knowledge is the basis of our existence too. That isn't something unique to nature because nature is our nature. It's unique to all things, all life forms, all forms of life in terms of this. And yet, if it's natural, it completely transcends everything we can even imagine and comprehend about what life even means. Because life, in that respect, if it's infinite, has no bounds whatsoever. There's nothing to understand because we already know it. It's the basis of our existence. It's the basis of existence, not just ours. So, as I said the other day to you, that my sense is that slipping and acting out and all that kind of stuff is a cry for help. And the help we're crying for is not someone else's attention, which we generally blame. We blame it on them not allowing us to or doing too much for whatever it is. We're blaming them rather than saying, no. The cry I'm actually asking for is realizing that I seem to be in a crisis within my own experience with a self I don't even recognize. Because when it cries out for help, I don't even listen. I don't pay any attention. I keep doing the wrong thing, thinking I'm going to get better at doing the wrong thing. So that self, that inner self, we call it, when it's just thoughts thinking of themselves, is not who we are. That's a lie. Filled with hatred, filled with loathing, filled with fear, because we know better. We know what it's going to do if we maintain it is corrode our capacity. It's going to turn us into cannibals of our own experience and our own physicality in the name of thinking that we're going to satisfy our hunger, but we're eating our seeming self. Cannibals have never been known to eat themselves. Why? Because they don't see cannibalism as wrong. They see it as the thing to do. Insane as it is, they don't eat themselves. And yet within the corrosive thinking of it, it always tends to lead to something that indicates that it isn't the right thing to do. It isn't the right approach to life. So the now of it is 100% always going to be where you are here now, always. Always. So the looking is beginning to concede. It's a surrender of sorts, but to really see it clearly is to realize there is no surrender at all. It's just the willingness to start to notice that if my thoughts are delusional, they have no basis in reality. If I understand it, just like in Alcoholics Anonymous, when they identified the disease of alcoholism as an allergy and not a failure of the will, but just saw that when somebody with that allergy gives alcohol to that allergy is going to abnormally react and start this cycle of wanting more of what it can never be satisfied with. It's the same with a lie in our mentality. A lie can never be true, so the more and more we think it can be, the more we give it credit for that possibility, which is impossible, and feel life is impossible as a result.
Yeah, I really like what you had said. I was listening to the podcast of you and Gabe this morning when I couldn't sleep, and when you were talking about it, I'm just going to read it. It's not an accident. When people overdose, people say it's an accident. There are no accidents when people are doing drugs that are known to kill people and then die. It's not an accident. It's an accident for us to think that it's predictable and that if you do a little, it's not going to have that big of an impact, because a little is never enough when it starts dealing with it. If I start tolerating a little and I still find the problem, I'm going to want more. And that really hit home this morning when I read that.
Yeah.
Especially with my recent relapse. Exactly.
I
was really able to identify with because it's a little, the impact isn't going to be that big. And then,
well, then you can see
my
the
problem was still
thinking.
there, so I had to have more. And I really, really saw that this morning.
So here again, to that point of reassurance in terms of death, when someone dies, they're not coming back. That's reassuring. We don't think of it in those terms because we're somewhat hell-bent in our thinking that we think our thinking is correct and that these things shouldn't happen. When in fact, in reality, there is no death. Everything's always new. The nature of nature isn't destroyed when a body dies. It's just transformed into what it was made up to begin with, or became in the meantime. So in that same sense, Mark, when you begin to give credit for credit due, if you've got an allergy in your body, like I don't handle sugar well. The allergy of alcoholism is an inability to metabolize sugar. So if I eat sugar, I feel depressed the next day. I feel just like I have a hangover, especially as I'm sober longer. I can feel the weight of that morning after if I do something. And I don't tend to eat white sugar at all because there's another refined version of something. If you eat sugarcane, it's got a lot of fiber in it. It balances out the hypoglycemic tendencies of raw sugar, or not raw sugar, but refined sugar, that throw the whole body into sort of a state of disrepair, it seems like. It throws everything off, it makes the metabolism so lazy as to have no potential to burn fat. So the body just keeps storing the fat rather than using it as fuel. It becomes lazy. But if you can absolutely see that the result will always be the same, like an allergy, one of the reasons I think they talked about it as not being a moral problem, because they started to see if you've got the allergy, not everybody has this allergy in terms of alcohol. But I would say everybody has this allergy in terms of thinking, because it's possible for us to go out on a limb and make believe any thought we're having is right when it isn't. And then become so desperate for that rightness to be right that we end up setting off in that loop where we don't think there's any turning back because we forgot where it all began. We start to kind of go blind. So in that regard, I would say it's a human possibility because we were given the freedom to think whatever we want, however we want.
And
if that's true.
And think I'm God. And think that I'm God.
Well, if we think our thoughts create reality, we must think that's why we think we create ourselves and then think everyone else should listen to us because we think we're the only self that exists.
Right. And
think about that, because I'm having my thoughts. I think I'm the only self that exists. Narcissism, self-centeredness, egocentrism, all those kind of things that come out of that are coming from that basic thinking. All I am is what I think.
And I really liked what you said the other day about where if in that respect, if my thoughts were reality, and that would, I'm creating my own reality. Basically, there was no reality before I was born, but also that the abundance. Like if I was truly able to create my reality, I would be creating abundance, and I wouldn't need or want all these other things. And you would have your own abundance, and everybody else would have their own abundance.
You can see the complete irrationality to it.
Right.
By thinking, if I'm the creator of God and yet I'm suffering from scarcity.
Right.
So I need to make more and more God to be able to be infinite.
Yeah, yeah.
Mark, excuse me for 1 second. I left my water and I want to grab it.
Okay, go do you.
I'm going to pause us. Back.
All right.
So yes, you can, as you begin, the illogic thing is to think that if I'm insane in my thinking, and insanity doesn't take a lot to create. As soon as I'm listening to my thoughts, think about this. I'm listening to the voices in my head. What are those voices talking about? The thoughts I'm having. Mm-hmm. I've assigned a narrative to those thoughts, like a movie, and now I'm listening to those thoughts. So I think when I listen to other people, if I'm listening to thoughts in my head as being reality, I think when other people speak, I'm only hearing what I think. So I'm not listening to them at all. I'm listening to illusions And if I start then thinking what I see is happening is only what I think is happening, I start realizing that's exactly the definition of insanity, seeing and hearing things that aren't happening.
You say that sounds very depressing.
Well, I mean, it's the source of alienation. And see, I'm all alone in the universe. I'm the only creator. I have nothing. I feel empty. Why am I feeling empty? Because the thinking I'm doing has no denominator. It has no numerator, but I keep thinking the numerator, if it gets bigger, it'll eventually the denominator will at least be one and match the numerator rather than zero and always zero out, always zero out.
The last thing on my list that I didn't say was community. I wanted to talk about community. And it's because I'm missing community. I've narrowed it down like you just described to the singular it's just me in the universe, it feels like.
Well, in the universe, singularity was what was presumed to be the Big Bang. Everything got so tight it had to explode, right? But the singularity is also what creates the black holes because they become so dense in matter. Think of this in terms of our thinking. We think this matters so much that I've spent years and years and years and years making it matter more and more and more. And it gets so dense that it becomes a black hole. What is that? Just vaporous, empty, distant, completely alone, struggling, nothing I can do. It's hopeless. There's no chance whatsoever. Even thinking of the fact that there's no chance is an accurate assessment of the thinking we're doing, not reality, not truth. To think I have my own truth is to think there is no other truth, that there is no real reality. It's all up to me. What a burden to place, having been given the gift of everything. And I make believe that I now have to be that gift and come up with the understanding that basically qualifies me and deserves me to have, or allows me to deserve it, rather than be thankful for it and say, oh, this is just the nature of nature. Thank you. I've been struggling to get what I've already had because I wanted to get credit for it. Why did I want credit? Because I was bankrupt and I needed credit to keep the business going, the enterprise going, the ideas I have about myself, who I am, what I think. It's all it is. It's a complete mock-up.
Yeah.
And the mocking, people never seem to laugh at jokes pointed at them because they know that them they're pointed at is a joke. That's why people tend to laugh, but not the person who's being laughed at. Because we've been very sensitive about this self that we have and don't want any attention to be drawn to it because we're embarrassed to make believe that all I am is what I think, and that self I talk about, even in the sentences like we talked about yesterday, I think during the walk, that I am working on myself.
Wow.
What's wrong with why I am working? I am developing. I am growing. We even incorporated into our language to create the narrative, to give it relativity, to give it weight, to give it matter, to give it substance, to give it a form. And again, we're doing that to induce the conspiracy amongst others that we are in fact the creators of reality, and wonder why we struggle to get to God. Can never seem to find God. God never seems to be enough. Wherever we're looking, we've been seeking for centuries, millennia, trying to find God. God has been lost. Whatever that God even means, I don't know. But I would suggest it certainly doesn't mean hateful, spiteful, unloving, corrupt, caustic, destructive, harmful behaviors. I would say it might, if it's loving at all, it certainly probably isn't those things.
Yeah, it's funny when I can't find God is, what I'm looking for is that I'm looking for God to be my co-conspirator.
You're looking for taking credit for finding God, which is why you presume God is lost because you think you are God. And you cannot even admit that wholeheartedly to your seeming self because your self is based in disbelief and hatred and contempt and certainly would never buy anything you tried to sell it. We're constantly trying to fix this self. It's just a thought about a thought itself that we have mistaken for ourself. It's the ultimate ID theft.
Nothing that I'd be able to sell myself. I like that because, as I said this morning, when I couldn't sleep and I was tossing and my head was busy, my thoughts were busy. I was thinking a lot. I was thinking about my thoughts a lot. And I was listening to you and Gabe, and I was listening to other things. And and like I could grasp bits of reality and know it, and then like that black hole that you were talking about, like just sucked it right. Like it was so dense, it just, and I'd be like, how in the hell am I back? Like I was just like in this listening to it, and like instantaneously I can go back to, because I'm trying to sell myself on the concept of that I'm okay.
Well, the I you're talking about is not okay, and that's worth noting because that self is not okay. It will never be okay. And it's the same thing. Think about this in relation to the idea that if you're an alcoholic and have an allergy, every time you drink, the allergy will say, what you need is more, right?
Yeah.
What I need is, and you don't know, yours, what concerns me about your slips is that they're very minor. It's not a lot. It's not a complete blackout, drunk driving, once again, all that stuff. They're very minor. What that tells me is you're setting the stage for the real blackout by saying, I got it under control. I just did it twice. I didn't look, I did this. I'm making a case for my ability to actually do it and control it. Because I did a little here and a little there, and it didn't blow into this whole thing. And at some point, that's going to seep into I got this. In the 12 and 12, Bill said something about fiscal irresponsibility, and he said generally when we were saving and being responsible, we were saving up for the next bender. Interesting. Finally, we get what looks like responsibility, but we're actually just setting the stage so that we have enough we can go back in and talk about how great we are, and there's no problem because we have money in our pockets. It's that same kind of idea that we get mentally, that we have currency. I got traction here. I just did it, and I didn't do it that hard and that bad. And every time I ever did that led to one that I wondered how did I get here? How did this even happen? How did I end up in my friend who just got married parents' bedroom at 4 a.m. at the hotel talking to them about my childhood when I came to, with both of them laying in bed, absolutely looking astonished. Like, why is he even in here?
Who are you?
Exactly. But I was sure I was stating my case to help them appreciate the value of all the nonsense that I was promoting. But I say that because if you begin to understand that the trigger is always going to be a trigger,
Okay.
and that very often people have, like I was a periodic, I didn't black out drink all the time. I would have little bouts and little bouts and little bouts. And then it would lead to one that was a all out, blast. Weddings were very popular for me about that. Funerals, any kind of party that was around some somber, well, I don't know that wedding somber, but it often is for some. But the point is, if you begin to see that reality will always be real and that it's always been real and that it can't not be real, and you start to see that as the same thing as the allergy, this insanity that we're able to, if I make believe, I can have a wrong thought and not have any problem because I can change it immediately. If I know it's wrong, I can change it. But as soon as I think it's right, I've created an interbulation, an inner conflict that is so hard to admit that I would do. Why would I do that? Why would I choose that if I weren't insane? Coming to that point takes a second to say, I've got to be out of my mind to do that. Bingo. And I know when I work with people, there's a point at which, as much as they say, I get it, that they say, that is just the sickest thing I could imagine doing. Where they really kind of stop for a second and say, I have been at the middle of this. I have somehow I've been asking my thinking to do something it cannot do, which is create reality, rather than allow it to flow from the knowingness, the absolute state of being that is our nature, my absolute awareness of that. People say, well, how could you be aware of that if you didn't know? And I said, because I know that I struggled, and I wouldn't struggle if I didn't know better. The struggle is an identifying feature. It's a guidance system. Say something's wrong here. Pay attention. Like stubbing a toe doesn't feel great. And it doesn't feel smart most of the time. You kind of feel stupid, right? All you've done is stubbed your toe. But it's the same thing with the thinking. And if I entertain those thoughts, I'm going to induce a state, a hypnotic trance that has me imagine I don't know any better than to do what I'm doing because it's the only thing I can do. And so I keep launching that ship over and over every moment, relaunching, 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 maintaining, maintaining.
What happens when you do know and you still do it? That's what.
Well, I would say that you think you know, but you don't. You
I
haven't
mean, like,
admitted.
I know, like, I get these vindictive thoughts, and like I know, like, that is not healthy. That is not good for that person. That is not good for me. That is like consume.
Because you think of it, Mark, as something that shouldn't be happening. You're even qualifying it now as something that's not good for you. It's not good for, it's perfectly good if you admit what it is. It's a lie about somebody. When you start noticing that it isn't the individual feelings, that it's all the gross feelings, all of them, all of the shame and all of the vindictiveness and the spite and the contempt and the anger and vengefulness and all that stuff is coming from one root, that you're going to get even by being at odds with someone else, somewhere else, for something else that isn't happening now except in your own imagination. And you know who you're trying to get even with? Yourself. And you know where you're never going to get even? Because you're already at odds with it. You're at odds making it up because you think you're at odds with reality. The only reason you think you're at odds with reality is because you think that is your reality and there is no other reality, and you've been fighting for it, defending against it, and denying and going numb to it, desensitizing your experience. So when you think you finally know, you may have some awareness, but you haven't really conceded it fully. I certainly haven't, because I still find things that seem deep down that shock me. And what I have learned is that when I started getting clear about this at all,
Mm-hmm.
I had much less going on that was wrong, but the little wrong that was going on became much more than the big stuff used to seem to be. In the early days of my sobriety, I had so much shit flying through my head, and I thought I had it handled. I thought I understood it. I was numb to 95% of it, at least. And the real facing of this is the thing that mythology talked about, fairy tales, facing that fear, facing that ultimate fear of thinking that that thing I thought I was, I never was to begin with, and I never can be to end with. The beginning and end is right now, awareness. It isn't there. It's only thought to be there. And to any degree I struggle, I know that I'm still maintaining those thoughts in that way. I don't have to worry about the little thoughts because I'm looking at the primary thought that I think my thinking is still real and that it's my savior and that I need to rush to it and think about it more. And I'm building on corruption and destruction rather than on a foundation that is an absolute perfect form where I am not only okay, I am perfectly okay, perfectly fine, perfectly in the know, perfectly stable, perfectly content. That's the nature of our existence. I don't have to think it is for it to be that. That's a big concession. If I think I am, generally I'm not, because I'm again relying on my thinking to say that I am rather than say I am regardless of what I think. And now I have a sense of clarity with the thinking I do because I just simply concede it regardless of what I'm thinking. And now I see the play, the 95 act play that I've been acting out as just another distraction to the fact that I know better. If I didn't, if I didn't know better, I wouldn't know that those things were conflicted.
I want to make sure I jotted that down right. Well, it's on tape. I can go back, but I am no matter what I think.
Yes.
Like that.
Even in the Bible, God is defined as the great I am.
Hmm.
And we say, I am working on myself. I need more self. Think of this. I need more self-help. Think of the self-help industry helping people to a self they don't have. But for $10 billion, we're going to help you fix that self. We're going to help you fix it. And we're going to add another book to your shelves that will give you a clue as to how to fix this, as though it's a secret, as though it's a mystery, as though it's something we don't know until somebody else tells us. Again, looking for them to do what we are unwilling to do in our own experience. It keeps us, we are holding ourselves captive. We are the kidnapper and the hostage simultaneously, thinking it's out there because it's so preposterous. We even know it's preposterous, which when you see blame and shame and fault is actually a condition of you knowing better. You're trying desperately to get out from under the weight of what you know is wrong. So what do? Blame, shame, fault. Everybody else, everything else. Never me. Not what I'm doing. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. No, it isn't. Think of the things we said when we were kids. That's what you think. It's pretty clear for a 4-year-old, right? That's what you think. I know you are, but what am I? People are defining that. Kids know that when somebody's speaking about them, they're speaking about their own experience.
It's funny you say that. I used my voice in a loving manner, but I didn't shy down, and it wasn't. And again, I think I've talked about this. It was weird. Like, I didn't come in as an attack. I didn't feel like it came out as an attack. It felt like it came out of at love.
When?
2-3 months ago.
With?
Somebody in the program. And he said to me, and I he had brought up something that he thought was funny. Again, the joke was on me, and I didn't think it was funny. And I let him know, and he said, if that's, he said, then it's wrong of me if that's, and he took ownership of it. But then he said something afterwards, and I made a comment about, it never to be heard from again. And he's like, that's what you think? And so what you just said, the 4-year-old calling out, that's what you think, it just really hit me that, that was, that it sort of caught me for a second back then.
So here's the clincher of that. The 4-year-old saying that to the other person is doing that same thing too, to be able to see what that other person is doing. So when we think it's them, it's because denying what we're doing. We wouldn't notice it if we had nothing to do with it. Right. If that guy had pointed something, if that guy had said to you, I hate that you're 22 feet tall, what impact would it have on you? It'd be ridiculous. You'd know that there would be nothing there. There'd be no, the darts, the stings, the hurt that we feel is the hurt that we're hiding. And don't bother to underestimate your ability to underestimate your ability. Just start noticing that if we have been able to deceive ourselves most of our lives into doing things that are clearly not healthy for us, and then make believe they're the only things that we can do, we are people who have developed a severe case of justification and rationalization and deceptiveness, deceit, as a form of survival. And what we're trying to have survive is a deceitful self, a hateful self, a loathing self, because I know it isn't true. And I simply haven't come to terms with admitting it. I haven't come to terms with admitting it. That's all. And I mean, admitting it, the book says, in your innermost self. I would say that's simply being honest enough to be sufficient enough to admit the depth of it, rather than constantly play this tennis matches. Well, my tone was nice and my words were nice, so that means I was loving, as though my voice and words are the conduit of love. My voice and words are the conduit of love. So in essence, everything I'm doing, including the wrong, is a guidance system of that loving nature. It's giving me that chance to notice what's wrong, because I also know what's right. I couldn't know the wrong if I didn't know the right. And consider this in terms of that thing we were talking about earlier. Nobody ever shows up and says, help me feel worse. Right? Help me learn to think worse thoughts. Can you help me learn to be wrong more? Nobody does that.
Sure they do, but they disguise it as, you want to go have a good time? You want to go do this?
Yes. Yes. Well, good. So you see the deception, though, to the fact that if we were right, if we were really right, we wouldn't be searching all the time for right. We would be right, and we would be gracious in our generosity of sharing it, because we would recognize that that rightness is the nature of nature. It's something we already have. And if people don't know how to get seeds in the ground, somebody with seeds, Booker T. Washington, I think it was, who traveled around the South, he found seeds from around the world and brought it to people and said, you don't need to just plant corn. There's hundreds of different foods you can plant, and started teaching and training people just to plant seeds. Most natural thing. So if it's natural and we're acting unnatural and then think unnatural is natural, you can see the complement or the conflict there rather than the complement. If I'm acting wrong and admit I'm acting wrong, I'm right all of a sudden. If I'm wrong and think I'm right, I'm always going to be wrong. And if I'm wrong and if I'm right and think I'm wrong, I'm always going to be wrong. It's that mathematical thing of products. Minus times a minus is a positive. Minus times a plus is a negative. Plus times a minus is a negative. It's the same thing with our awareness, because mathematics is the universal language. It's speaking for all sorts of interactions, or can, if it's done properly. So the essence of this is not doing what we can to think through everything we've done and straighten out all the thinking about that's irrelevant. Nothing's happening that isn't happening now. If everything that's happening now is happening, it's worth noting that that contemplative advantage is in fact meditation. 11th step, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, not to improve our contact, but our conscious contact. What does that mean? How we think about God. And if I'm thinking about God as something I need to think about correctly, rather than concede, I don't need to think about it at all, because that whatever that power is was certainly there before my body started ruminating and thinking and imagining and conning and conniving and all that. Within the context of time and space, it was there. It was always there. And it's always been here, which is why it's here now, which is why if there is any hope, which doesn't take a lot of hope, to begin to concede that if it's always here and it's always now, then I always have everything I need, everything I need. And all the rest of it is just vanity to a degree and pretense, or preference. I'd like to do this. I'd like to do that. Think of the freedom of coming from, I have everything I need. And now I can do things I want freely without an anchor behind me trying to get enough out of that thing I want to kill myself in the process of trying to get enough that I can never get enough of. I already got enough. I'm already starting from enough. We always are. We just don't think of it in that terms because we think our mentality precedes reality. That's disordered. If you don't follow the orders of operation in math, you don't get the right solution. And mathematical equations are not problems for people who understand how to do them. They're easily solved. So equations are solved immediately. They know they can be solved. Just a matter of applying the exact same orders of operation every time. Same for us. If I'm looking at my thinking, if I'm looking at the words I use in my brain and start recognizing they're actually reflections of the thinking I'm doing. And if I look at the words that I speak and start to notice they're reflecting what I'm thinking, I will notice, as I have many, many times and do every day to some degree, that I'm saying things I don't even think I'm thinking when I start looking at the words correctly. I'm starting to admit that my thinking is something I think because nobody else sees, that I can hide and I can value and devalue, and I can pretend it's this when it's actually this, and then put on this air of conformity to the rest of the world and wonder why I don't feel like I'm part of the community. Think of communion in church. It's a holy, sacred event to be in community. Well, we're already there. We're already communing. We're already telepathically connected to everything that could possibly exist, including everything we haven't even conceived of in terms of existence. Nor is it required. So that is I would say, a meditation, because it happens in the moment. It's always where I am. When I feel that desperation pop up, I can know that what I'm doing is entertaining a thought that has no basis in reality, and I am perfectly free and welcome to continue. The question is, how far wrong do I want to go before I correct it? And maybe that means never. Maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe that's the choice. And people committing suicide and drinking themselves and overdosing, and I would say overdosing is suicide, are doing exactly that. I don't want to do it. I want to be bullheaded. I want to be insistent. I want to continue to fight. I want to continue to prove. Suicide is the ultimate form of self-control for a self that's out of control. It's crazy. Just like I drank out of control to prove I was in control.
Still, um, having a problem letting reality in. No,
You
I shouldn't
think?
say that. That was wrong. That was wrong because reality is always there.
Okay.
I don't know. I feel
So how would it be if you had that problem now if reality's already here and it can't go anywhere? It can't be more or less, it can't be there, and it can't be anywhere but here now always. Well, how could you see what you're thinking?
in the present, but but because I can use the past to remember not to touch it. I can use the past experiences to learn to not touch a stove.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But you keep touching the stove.
right. But
We all are to the degree that we're
but here's the thing, like, and again, I think that is, and I just sort of answered myself because not touching the stove again is just nature of nature. Like, I don't have to think about that. I know not to touch the stove. Um,
You know what the difference though is, Mark? Because you're describing something I didn't get into today. Is that all addictions are always an immediate sense of satisfaction and gratification
okay.
that leads to long-term pain. If I know people with peanut allergies, I've never known anyone to obsess over peanuts and compulsively eat peanuts who has a peanut allergy. Why? Because their throat seizes up, they get rashes, they feel so uncomfortable. They're never going to get near peanuts. They don't even buy packaged food that was made in buildings with peanuts.
Right.
Right? The difference is all of those concentrations I talked about, those reductions, those distillations, all create a feeling of better. So what do? Presume we are better rather than we're manipulating the feelings we're having about what's worse. Why would we constantly need to feel better if what we were doing at a level that we can't seem to put a finger on wasn't worse? So part of what I just witnessed you do is catch your words. I used to say to everybody, watch your words, and everybody said, well, you're telling me not to think. I said, I didn't say that. I said, just watch, literally observe your words. And as you start noticing them, this is good homework, something to do on a daily basis. It's what I do a lot because I want to see, I'm much more actively engaged in listening to what I'm thinking because I'm noticing that my words are actually telling me things that I don't always think I'm seeing, but doing. So if you can get the basis of this within the context of your thinking, you're going to start seeing the impulses are coming from a place that you don't even think you're thinking. Because your thinking that's going on right now is processing everything in your body. It's managing and handling all that stuff, and you're not thinking a lot about it until something hurts in your body. Then you think about what's wrong. I need some direction. I need to figure this out. Even doctors don't always know. They're making guesses. Your pancreas hurts. Maybe it's your pancreas. But it's this. Maybe it's blood. Maybe it's white. All this kind of stuff, right? So we don't need to know the details emotionally, mentally, to know when something's wrong because we feel wrong. And my experience is when I started thinking I had it up here in the head, I talk in the language. I always thought of my consciousness as only this language that I'm speaking in my brain, right? The talking to myself, per se, when I'm really just expressing my thoughts in words. And my thoughts seem to find the words, literally, without my thinking much about it. I just have words that are developed around that, and they seem to match up. And if they don't, I'm constantly trying to refine them. So there's some participation in that, but there's also a natural merging of words with the thoughts, because the words are coming from thoughts, just like feelings are coming from thoughts. So are the compulsive actions and the impulsive actions. Behaviors are all coming from the thoughts. So if I get to the point where I start to notice what I'm doing in the language I'm speaking, it becomes easy to start noticing that there's a lot of things I don't even think I'm doing that are impelling, like an implosion, because I thought it was hidden, because I thought I didn't see it, because I thought it was in the dark, because I thought it was in my subconscious, that I pretended I couldn't see those things, and that meant there was nothing I could do about those things. While I am the one, if I'm trying to hold the thinking I'm doing that I'm most aware of, certainly I'm not doing any better job with the thinking I don't think I'm thinking, that I keep down and buried and think it's something I can't do anything about. Think of how clever it is that I would be doing the thinking that I'm pretending I'm not doing, and then claim there's nothing I can do about it. Another deception.
I've always had a problem with people saying "fuck your feelings," but I don't have a problem with "fuck my thoughts." And if my
Well,
feelings come
if
from
your
my
thoughts are
thoughts,
fucked, if your thoughts are fucked, they're already doing it.
right? But I'd never heard it put that way. That feelings come from my thoughts. So,
Yeah, well, they're mirror images.
right, but
We talk about reflecting on our thoughts. That's the feelings are the mirror image of the thoughts, they're reflections. So think about this. Think of somebody you love and pretend you hate them. Very hard to do. Very hard to do.
yeah,
Then think of somebody you hate and start to love them. Much trickier. Now, if love is the basis, we actually already love that person. But the addiction to the thinking becomes so evident in the nature of trying to actually act like we love them and care for them. Because the addiction is, I hate him, I hate him, I hate him, I hate him. Well, who do I really hate? The self I am. The self that could even come up with that thought is what I'm hating. And what am I trying to do? Pin the tail on another donkey, rather than notice the tail's already on me. And the tale I'm telling is this long, protracted story about what's wrong in the world and so on and so forth. And I have lots of those stories. I know better what they are. I'm better at speaking honestly about what I'm thinking. And that means it doesn't matter to me how people respond or react. That's their business. I give them the freedom. And when they do and don't like it, I'm thankful that they were honest enough to tell me to my face what they were thinking, rather than harbor that thought and pretend they're happy. How many people have I dealt with that pretend they're happy with what I've done and don't tell me until it's way beyond the end of a relationship that just sort of fades off?
so I know that like you shared with me like you've some people and just like everybody, people hurt us or do things that are inappropriate, and we we don't want them around us anymore for whatever reasons. Um, because again, I don't want to touch the stove again, but I do want that person. It's like so weird that I still I miss what I had with that person.
You miss?
I miss what I had with that person.
Yeah, you know why? Because you think right now you don't have it.
Right.
What you're missing is the point that you still have it. You just don't pay attention to it. The attention you're paying to it is based in, I don't have it. So what are you going to think? They're not here. I wish I was. Think about all the wishes we have. Think about that. That's fairy tale. We don't wish for what's happening as what's happening because it's already happening. We don't have to wish for that at all. That's not a wishful thing. It's not magic. It's not magical thinking and wishful thinking and all that. The fact is, the line is never broken. We're already, the intimacy that we all share is always, it's
I mean, listen, when
absolute,
I say
it's
they're,
present.
that those people are, I'm not talking like those people are gone. They're just like I've written them off.
I understand, but in a concept, you think they're not here. They're still here with you. You have just created a situation that drives the narrative that they're gone. They're not gone dead. They're just away and you don't talk to them and you wish you'd been better and all that kind of stuff. The better that you really wish is that you were better now, thinking about it accurately and honestly, and realizing that it's the thoughts you're having about your own self that you've pinned on them to make believe they're not here so you can ignore what you're doing present.
Right.
That's what's happening. So
really
when you said
really
other people
sick.
can exactly, and you even said other people can hurt us. Not so.
Yeah.
If we weren't hurting, things people said would not hurt us. And the reason it hurts us, we're actually, my experience is we're creating that, we're manifesting that, we're asking for it, and we're finally able to admit that we're hurt by other people's thoughts, meaning we're also admitting that we are hurt by the thoughts we are maintaining, desperately hurt and in pain and misery. The big book says, avoid the deliberate manufacture of misery. We think are problems of our own making. Those problems persist well after sobriety sets in, and to the degree that they do, and we make believe that's our reality, we are not maintaining a spiritual program, we're maintaining a mental program as spirituality, and it's corrupt and going to lead to impulsive and compulsive behaviors. And I would suggest you don't have to go out and drink and use drugs to be compulsive. I'm compulsive every day in some way. There's always things I get in my head and I see that I can't seem to unwind it all the time. And I want to act on it. So I fulfill the action. I don't try to stop those. I try to start them. I want to start them enough that I finally say, this makes no sense. Just like when I finally got sober. I'm never going to make sense out of trying to fight them because I'm fighting my own experience rather than conceding that I'm obviously dealing with something I have not yet dealt with. And take it seriously enough to be honest about it and simply say, I can act on this. Probably not going to kill me to have a bag of potato chips. But it's the exact same action of any compulsion. It's an idea to get some immediate gratification for the inability to sit still with feelings that are uncomfortable. And that discomfort is telling me you are creating discomfort, instability, unnatural ideas, unhealthy ideas that you think are true and real and natural. If that's the case,
because I'm not running past anybody.
The what?
Yeah, because at 3 a.m, I'm not running them past anybody.
Yeah, it helps when you're alone to continue to manage them. And if you circulate, it's like a drain. It just gets tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And you feel there's no place to go. So writing helps. Beginning to know that when at first I was writing about the ego, I started writing years ago, when I was writing about the ego, and I was sitting in a coffee shop at 4:30 or 5 in the morning in El Segundo, and I was writing about the ego and all these traits that it had, and it hit me that I was reinforcing and formalizing that there was actually an ego to write about. And my whole body turned gray. I mean, I had a panic attack. I literally, all the fear that had been built up became obvious. And I stood up, I left everything. I had my Mount Block pen, I had my phone, my computer. I just left it inside the door and walked outside. And a woman coming the other day almost dropped the other direction because she just looked at me and could see that I thought I was going to die. I'd never had a panic attack. I thought I was going to die. And my skin turned gray. And all I said for like 3 hours was, I am as I am. I am as I am. I am as I am, because I was just overrun by the awareness of the lies and the stories and the development and the commitment and the insistence and the persistence was caused by the constant harping in my own experience. And when it was gone, in a sense, I saw clearly the potential for that sickness to always be resurrected, always be instigated, always be. The freedom was that was love saying, look, if I set limits, it wouldn't be love. It would be conditional. And the infinite love that we have gives us the freedom to be completely insane and make believe it's the only thing we can do. That's the freedom. The fact is, it isn't the only option. It isn't. It's one of many, many, many better than that. And yet, historically, I don't know if it's a lack of evolution. I don't know what the overall overarching history would be, or the umbrella of it all. But I would say we've done it long enough to make believe so true that we've developed cultural ideas and mores and creeds and all kinds of other basic ideas that we think are honest and real and true that we continue to perpetuate with each other, almost, if not absolutely, as a conspiracy to try to maintain the idea that a conspiracy will someday become the ruling party, the ruling class, and that we're going to win this argument, we're going to win this fight. When in fact, it's the losing of it that is the win. It's the noticing that the impossibility of it is always going to be impossible because it wouldn't be impossible if it weren't impossible. And to think it's possible in the face of impossibility is to just set off a cavalcade of thinking that just loops and loops and loops and loops and loops. It's a feedback loop that, in my experience, is a hallucination and a trance like a hypnotist would do with anyone who basically takes over their psyche. And so we really don't believe we don't know any better. But what better conclusion could that hypnotic trance offer than to make believe we don't know anything about the thing that we keep doing moment to moment to moment to moment? It's just the ultimate deception, the ultimate breakdown.
But I do know better, or it wouldn't be so disturbing.
Yes.
I think that's in the I know, as I know.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. We wouldn't suffer if we didn't know better, because suffering isn't a function of nature. Nature doesn't, or trees don't suffer when they die. They just fade and they just collapse and go, and they give themselves back to the earth so other trees can grow. You know, nature doesn't cry over this stuff. And yet it may have an effect when we violate it. I don't think it has an emotional effect, because I think that's something unique to animals and humans. I think animals have a sensation of emotion. They certainly have care for their immediate brood and whatever they're responsible for. There's a certain regard that sort of transcends the individual animal. So the beauty of it is there's nothing to figure out if it's already in order. And if intuition is our nature, then contemplating what we're doing wrong as wrong gives us the freedom, rather than to perpetuate and commit to it and insist on continuing and wonder why it persists in this addictive thrive, is to just be quiet for a second. Exactly what the book says. Pause when agitated. Just take a breath. And the knowingness comes before my experience is, I do and say things, or I say and do things. Because saying is a doing, behaving is a doing, thinking is a doing. Thinking is a function of the body. Is defined as a function of the body, something the body does. One of the definitions. It's something that happens. Well, thoughts happen. And how and what I think about them is what I have happen in relation to my thinking. Those are the choices I make. So if I can concede that and start to notice that intuition has me do things before normally I'm processing, trying to get to the right decision to make it. And all of a sudden I'm acting simultaneously because there's no process involved. Thinking is a process, knowing is not. I know exactly what to do, and my thinking knows then exactly how to get me there, how to function on that basis.
Thinking is, what was that? Thinking is the process. What was that?
Thinking is a process, like change is a process. Time is basically a process of change. So what's always new is always changing, but what's never changing is that it's always new and it's always changing. So the absolute, if you start to look at what we call the relative, the absolute becomes obvious, because the opposites are no longer opposites. They're just different positions on the same point, of the same point. The neutral point at the center is the balancing point. The extreme good or the extreme bad are the choices we make in relation to that point. And the difference typically of what's right and wrong, good and bad, is, does it get me what I wanted when I started? Are my wants being fulfilled here? Not my needs, my wants. Are my desires? Are they being fulfilled? Am I seeing the impact I'd like to have on that other person? Am I seeing it happen in the way that would be consistent with a knowing nature rather than a thinking I know nature? and constantly trying to manipulate the actions to make it look like something rather than start being the being and have that thing be something, which is expression. It is that natural form of expression that is intuitive, which is defined, as I said earlier, as a beyond thought. So it's beyond reason, it's beyond understanding, because it's not thinking. It's a knowingness of knowing. It's a knowing of knowing.
I think I heard an analogy this morning or whatever, and I think again I'm very comfortable with the fact of my knowing, and which is wonderful. Um, I think where I lose my words or my vocal cords is when I won't move it into wisdom.
Well, intuition is wisdom, and
Well, the knowing,
it's also inspiration, because
I
it's
mean,
based in spirit. It's based in the essence of life rather than the contorted perversions that we tell of stories that we make up about life.
here's the good analogy. Like knowing is knowing that an eggplant is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad.
Repeat that.
An eggplant knowledge or knowing is knowing that an eggplant is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad.
Probably work though.
Um,
So here's what's even more interesting. Without the name eggplant, it would still be what it is. So as it starts, as the sort of preposterous nature of our insistent thinking starts to fall apart, you begin to realize that we've come up with all sorts of justifications for thinking we know. When in fact, the things that are there, they know exactly what to do, and they don't rely on our definition at all. As a matter of fact, our definition often screws up our relationship with those things because we think of it in any incorrect way. We don't utilize it in the best way necessarily. And there's between these points of good and bad are all sorts of gray area
yeah.
where choice exists. So you said I'm perfectly comfortable with that. I would say you're starting to witness the comfort, but I would also suggest that there is a piece of you that is still seemingly scared to death for that to even seem comfortable rather than a natural contented state of being. You're starting to even notice there may be some comfort you haven't even noticed from the distress you're starting to move out of. And I don't say that as a scare tactic, but simply to notice that to any degree, I know that to any degree that I have thoughts that I don't think I have, and that's one great way of making believe that they're incontestable because they're wrong and nobody can see them because I don't even have them. And in the process of letting go, we're told to let go absolutely. If I don't have something, I can't let it go. And if I'm had by something or some essence, if I am a product of reality, I can't let that go. And I won't let go of something I say I don't have. So acting as though the things I have, I don't have, is another way of being in conflict with what I actually have that I simply don't think I have. And the convenience of not thinking I have it once more leads to the idea that I can only do what I always do, which is to repeat the bad behavior over and over and over again. And that's a good definition of addiction. I have nothing to do with it. There's nothing I can do about it. The only thing I can do is keep doing it. So in the terms of thinking, it becomes pretty easy to start thinking things that have been held historically to be true and not even question them, to the point where I don't even have a conversation about them at all. I'm just acting on them in a subconscious seeming way. But I know the actions are wrong because I'm creating effects that don't seem to fit. So I can broad stroke it and say, you know what, there's still stuff brewing in me that I haven't paid any attention to. And by admitting that, I start to have a relationship to it that's friendly and open. And the dissipation of it begins to happen rather than this resolution. I need to constantly resolve things that are really not resolved. They just feel better for a minute. And the disillusion means I don't even remember I even had it. Months could go by and I say, I didn't even do that thing anymore. I don't even think that. They're not there because it was never there except for my insistence to maintain it. And then even when I was maintaining it, all it was a thought, period. It wasn't reality. I had to maintain it all the time to give it the impression. Interesting, again, to this paradox of thinking that we're God and then are struggling with scarcity. How would I know that thinking about something permanently and constantly was like reality if reality wasn't permanent and constant? I'm admitting it in the actions I'm taking again and acting as though I don't know. I'm trying to perfect the thinking while reality is already perfect. I'm trying to make it consistent. It's already consistent. I'm trying to make it permanent. Never changes. It's already permanent. And what are the things I can't do? All those things. What's the frustration? What's the distress? I can't do those things. Why? I don't need to. It's already done. If I'm thinking I'm not where I belong, I'm always thinking I need to be in some other place with some other thing. It's never going to be satisfying because the lie is never going to be true enough to satisfy it. I'm always where I am. You're always where you are. We're all always where we are. And we're all witnessing everything that's happening simultaneously all the time. Now, I can think I'm not and think I need to work on the thinking that's not, rather than just simply concede that thinking is a joke and it's insane. And there's nothing to it other than my maintenance. If I'm trying to fix it, I think it's real. I think it's actually
word
broken.
was concede. That's what I was just spending the last couple of minutes thinking about. Was I just need to fucking surrender. I just need to concede.
Well, the bigger surrender is realizing there's no fight. It's literally an illusion of your own thinking that there's something to fight because you still think there's something to fight.
Don
That's
Quixote.
exactly. But Mark, I think some of the points you're making is that there's great wonder and awe in contemplating truth and reality as true and as real. It's a wonderland. We're searching for having fun all the time, and yet the wonderland is where we are, and the awe is where we are, and the inspiration and the wisdom and the absolute state of being and knowing is where we are always. And we're acting like it's not. That has been a failure of humanity as long as humanity's been there. But fortunately, the failure has been consistent enough to mention that it's been going on because we have been resisting what we're doing and thinking we can win that fight, to basically note that this is the source of addiction. This is the source of all those other compulsive actions, all those things that seem so difficult to stop, that are at all-time highs in many ways, in many places around the world. The consumption of drugs, the consumption of alcohol. Alcohol actually is on a decline right now, but drug use is on an incline because all kinds of other things that used to be illegal are now legal, and there's much more freedom to go ahead and use those things. And there's newer drugs that are coming out that are more fascinating and, et cetera, et cetera. How is it that we could be absolutely intact and not be fascinated with our natural state, and then feel by not being fascinated, we become depressed and need to then overcome it by taking drugs into our system, by manipulating our system to feel better without noticing? We already have one of the best chemical factories on the planet, each of us. Anyone healthy has a factory in them that develops chemicals, and I would say even people that are unhealthy do, and they're unhealthy because the chemicals that they've been producing are corrosive and conflicted and trying to make sense out of insanity, which the body can't do. That's what disease is. It's just basically a byproduct of this disease thought. My sense is, endorphins were discovered sometime in the 60s or 70s from guys that were long distance runners. I think Jim Fixx was one of the first guys that kind of, and it's a natural opiate. Imagine the drugs that might be induced by our awareness if we were spending more time in the awe of inspiration and wisdom and knowingness, and the awe of knowing that we know, and reminding that even in the midst of thinking we don't, saying, wow, I can think I don't, even in the midst of knowing that I do. Pretty fascinating how many things I can be aware of that wouldn't seem to line up and probably don't, and yet I know and I'm aware of them, even within my thinking. Start to give credit where credit is due. I read something the other day, I think it was Hegel, who said, if you do something very simple, really well, or perfectly, you will start doing what seem to be challenging things that are complicated much better soon. Something to that effect. And the simplicity of this is just noting that we're aware of what's happening right now. And then we jump into our thinking, and we're asking our thinking to tell us whether it thinks we're aware when it's the self we're talking to, as though it's distinct and separate from what we're doing. We've created this whole mythology to give ourselves an out while it's the thing that traps us. Because within insanity, nothing adds up to anything accountable. It's all a lack of accounting that's going on. Mathematics doesn't work in insanity. It's all backward. It's all twisted. It's all upside down, disordered, which is where the disorders come from. Anyway, you're a good man. I love you. And I'm very appreciative that even in the state that led you to do what you did, that many people, in my dreams, Mark, when I think about slipping and going out, the first thought I have is I know exactly what to do, is to go back, go connect with somebody and tell them what. The next thought is, how can I avoid meeting that person and saying what I did? Every time. And the horror of the dream is that.
Yeah.
And yet within my waking dream now, I tend to say the things I think, even when I know they're sick, I just say, I want to share a thought that I'm having right now. And I say it. And it's never quite as bad. And it's often a lot funnier for people to hear somebody even admit that kind of sickness publicly, and it dissipates immediately. And so rather than feel hamstrung by that as though it's something I need to fix internally, I'm actually being given the others that I used to blame now become the assets I can use to say, can I just say something that I'm thinking that's pretty sick, that seems sick to me? I don't know if it is, but, and let it out of the bag. Let it air itself. All it is words and vibration in the middle of air. They dissipate immediately. I don't have any obligation to repeat it. I don't have any obligation to act on it. None. But I can too. So this is helpful to me, to be with you, to watch you mark certain aspects of your own growing awareness and think of them in terms that are quantifiable, speakable. I don't always see it that way. And you're a huge help to me in this process, because my suspicion is we've all known this all along and we simply haven't been talking about it openly and collectively. And if we did more of that, that knowingness would immediately come to the surface, and we would start laughing at the things we've taken so seriously as to believe is who we are and reality, and start to see that reality has been on our side for us and with us the entire time and is never pulled back, never condemned, never hated, loathed, or anything. That's all coming out of this idea that we have about creating our own reality, because we know it's so abysmal to know there's no effort in reality all of a sudden because it's already done. Now, if I'm working intuitively, things are happening at the broadest level rather than my own little microscopic, I got to make this work and I got to do mass marketing to get everybody aware. Word of mouth will do it. If you're talking about anything true, word of mouth, when zero was created, within 100 some years, everybody got it. But it took 100 years for zero to be included in the numerical system. But the point is, if it was not seemed to be known for thousands of years, it took a very little bit of time for people to actually say, oh, and boom, you've got a critical mass of people thinking critically, not in terms of contempt, but critically in terms of wise, accurate assessments.
I want to read one last thing before we go.
Please.
And it was something, again, I love not many people have a lot of depth and weight to me. So I really appreciate that about you and the way you articulate it. But again, going back to the knowing and again, not speaking. And this is a quote. I mean, relationships are very much built on that very often. It's kind of a hostage taking thing. You told me where you don't want me to step, so I protect those boundaries. What are you doing? Giving the person more and more opportunity to maintain their own insane idea about their limitations as being who they are. It isn't helping them. It isn't growing. It isn't dynamic. Relationships get stagnant as a result of that. You can't be careful enough to avoid somebody else's feelings when you think you can hurt them and don't notice there's a chance everyone's hurting. Beautiful.
Well, then the real help ultimately I said early on in this discussion when we started doing it publicly that typically relationships break off in thank you or fuck you. And the difference is whether you value what the person gave you the perspective to start seeing you're doing rather than blame them for the hurt that you're feeling. So if I think someone's hurt me, I'm not taking advantage of the fact that they're giving me a chance to notice I've been hurting and pretending I'm not hurting. And it's always based, you said I have depth and weight. I hope I have neither. Because matter and depth is depressing. That's the area I think I'm hiding stuff in, this fake depth that we think. Reality is superficial and it's weightless. You know how much light weighs? There's no matter in it at all because it's at full speed. There's no time, which means there's no dimension in light. Think of this. Within our universe, this fact exists, and yet we struggle to determine whether or not there's an infinite source. It's weightless. Think of light in both its terms it's used. Light in terms of no weight, because there's no matter in it whatsoever.
Okay.
And bright in terms of no shadows. But we see most light as shadows. This knowing light is shadowless because it's all knowing. It's absolute. It isn't a variation of the colors that we're able to see. It's an absolute blinding light in a sense, rather than the blackness of the void we feel afraid of when we actually are seeing perfectly the darkness we're creating by absolutely maintaining an idea that has no basis in reality. That's darkness. There's a void there. We're not lost in the void. We're not blind. We're actually seeing the blackness clearly and don't like it. It scares us. Why? Because we're inducing it. We're creating it. So that's a beautiful quote and a great ending. And I appreciate it a lot, Mark. It's your insight, your process has been very helpful in my coming to terms with more of what I would like to do and like to do better than I do. And my sense is this conversation is a word of mouth conversation. If people find value, other people can listen and then talk about it. And what I found is that when I started talking about this more openly rather than one-on-one, I started realizing that I didn't have the skills to do it on a foundation that was much broader than one-on-one, because there's a lot of feedback that happens when you get into an environment that has multiple people in it. And there's conspiracies and there's connections and there's allegiances and all this kind of stuff that we've all mapped out to try to protect each other and our seeming self. And yet by doing this, it's the one way that can afford us by applying it, just like practicing the principles. It's actually beginning to practice the principle openly on a mental basis to begin to reaffirm the nature of our thinking and align our words with that nature rather than all these stories and loops we've been telling that aren't true and aren't real and never going to be. All those narratives start to melt. And a lot of people say, I don't know what to say. And I said, that's the start right there. You don't think you know what to say because you've been thinking you knew what to say the whole time and you had nothing to say. And now all of a sudden, you're starting to notice that your awareness is greater than that. And you have no words for it because it's profoundly beyond words. And then the question is, how do I put words? How can I convey? How can I do my best to give what everyone already has rather than think of it as me doing it for them? So I say I'm not after the depth or the weight because those are things I created within the thinking I did to make believe that, think about it, people say truth is deep. That means it's not here, it's somewhere else, like God is in heaven. Truth it's at the bottom of a hole. I got to go dig it up. Can't be possible. It's accessible. It's synchronous. It's simultaneous. It's immediate. It's now, always. If that's its basis, that's our basis. And if that's our basis, and we start speaking of it in that way, the lines we use will convey quicker than the thoughts we've been conveying that had no basis and are just basically reinforcing other people's conspiratorial ideas about what's right and what's wrong and who they are and who they think they are and all that kind of stuff. So, that was a beautiful quote and perfect ending for the new beginning.
Yeah.
Love you, brother.
Love you. Bye.
See you around campus.